Millionaire husband said never touch me public, but when he saw her with another man, he lost control. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Meet Claire. She's a strong, independent woman, but lately, she's been struggling to find her footing. A waitress at a small local diner. Claire's life isn't exactly what she imagined growing up. She's been working non-stop just to make ends meet, barely scraping by. But today, something's different. She's been invited to a prestigious charity gala by her husband, a man she's been married to for 2 years. But their relationship is far from typical. Claire's husband, Julian Blackwood, is a millionaire, a powerful CEO with a reputation for being ruthless. When they first met, their connection was immediate, but their marriage has always been more about business than love. Julian made it clear from the start, no public displays of affection. In fact, he had a rule: never touch me in public. He said it was to protect his reputation, to keep his image intact in front of his investors and business partners. Claire, despite her reservations, agreed to his terms. After all, she didn't have much of a choice. Her family was drowning in debt, and Julian promised to take care of everything. But that doesn't mean it was easy for Claire. At the gala, surrounded by the city's most powerful people, she felt out of place. Dressed in a sleek designer gown, Claire stood beside her husband, her mind racing. She could feel the eyes of the crowd on them, but there was something missing. Julian stood tall and confident, smiling, shaking hands, and greeting other high-profile guests. But he didn't look at her. Not once. Not a single smile. Not even a touch. It was as if she were invisible. And yet, she still felt an inexplicable pull to him. She couldn't help but notice how handsome he looked, how his sharp jawline and dark eyes glistened under the soft lighting. The moment Julian stepped away to greet another business partner, Claire sighed, looking around the room. It felt like she was surrounded by strangers. Everyone seemed so perfect, so polished. And here she was, just a waitress in a glamorous world she didn't belong in. But then, as she scanned the room, her eyes caught someone she didn't expect. A man, standing alone near the bar, looking equally out of place. His hair was slightly tousled. His suit wasn't as perfectly tailored as the others, and he seemed a little lost. He looked real. Without thinking, Claire made her way toward him, feeling a strange sense of comfort in his awkwardness. She approached him and smiled. "Hi, I'm Claire," she said, extending her hand. He looked up, surprised, but then smiled back. "Liam," he replied. They shook hands. Liam's eyes were warm, his smile genuine, and for a moment, Claire felt like she could breathe again. They began talking. About the party, about the city, about life. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Claire didn't feel like a trophy wife. She didn't feel like she had to be perfect. They laughed about the pretentiousness of the event, shared a joke about the stuffy guests. And before long, Claire felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Connection. As they continued talking, Claire's heart began to race, but she quickly reminded herself. She was married, and Julian was the man she was supposed to be with. But, still, she couldn't help the way she felt in Liam's presence. She didn't know why, but in that moment, it felt like he understood her in a way Julian never did. Then, as the night wore on, something unexpected happened. Claire saw Julian across the room, and he was talking to a woman. The woman was laughing, touching his arm lightly, and Claire felt a twinge of something she hadn't expected. Jealousy. And then, just as quickly, guilt. Julian had made it clear that their marriage wasn't about love. But seeing him with another woman made her feel something she hadn't in a long time. Desire. Before she could stop herself, Claire made her way over to him. Julian looked up and immediately gave her a cool smile, not even acknowledging the brief moment of tension that had just passed between them. His eyes then flicked to Liam, who had followed Claire over to Julian. Julian's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. The change in him was instantaneous, and Claire felt it in the air. He lost control. She could see it in his eyes. He was furious. "Claire, what are you doing?" he snapped, his voice low but sharp. Liam, sensing the tension, took a step back, excusing himself. Claire stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never seen Julian like this. He always controlled his emotions, never letting anything faze him. But now, it was clear that something had shifted, and she wasn't sure whether it was the anger in his eyes or the way her heart raced that made her realize. Julian might care for her more than he had let on, and that was just the beginning. Millionaire husband said never touch me public, but when he saw her with another man he lost control. When Liam stepped away, the tension in the air was thick. Claire couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as Julian's eyes followed Liam's every movement. His jaw clenched, his face suddenly cold, and she knew without a doubt that something had shifted in him. The Julian she had married, calculating, controlled, distant, was gone. In his place was a man who seemed almost jealous. It startled Claire. She had always known that Julian cared about appearances, about maintaining his image, but she had never seen him this upset over something so trivial. As she stood there, caught between the two men, her mind raced. Liam had stepped away, sensing the growing tension, but the damage had been done. Julian was now aware of something he had been ignoring for so long, the connection Claire had with someone else. The connection he had never truly given her. Claire wanted to say something, to defend herself, but she couldn't find the words. Her throat tightened as Julian's icy gaze turned toward her. He was silent for a long moment, and then he finally spoke, his voice low and dangerous. "What were you doing with him?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. Claire swallowed hard. "Talking," she said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just talking." Julian stepped closer to her, his presence looming. "You should know better than to entertain another man in front of me," he muttered, his tone sharp. Claire flinched. She had never seen him like this before. The man who always kept his emotions locked away, the man who treated their marriage like a business transaction, was now showing signs of something else. Was it jealousy? Concern? She couldn't tell. But it made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I didn't mean anything by it," she said, though the words felt hollow even as they left her lips. Julian was staring at her, his eyes cold, but there was something else in them. Something raw. "You didn't mean anything by it, huh?" he repeated, his voice taking on an edge. "Then why did I see the way he looked at you? The way you looked at him?" Claire opened her mouth to protest, but no words came. She didn't know how to explain the strange pull she had felt toward Liam, how, for just a moment, she had felt like she was seen, truly seen, by someone who didn't care about her title or her husband's wealth. But it didn't matter. Julian wasn't the type to listen. Instead, he turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Claire standing there, feeling smaller than ever before. She glanced around the room, the faces of the other guests blurred in her mind. She felt out of place, disconnected from everything around her. She hadn't felt this lost in a long time. She tried to shake off the feeling, but it lingered, like a shadow that wouldn't let her go. Julian had always been distant, always kept her at arm's length, and for the first time, Claire realized she had grown used to it. But now, after that brief interaction with Liam, something inside her had shifted. She wasn't sure what it was, but it felt like a wake-up call. Her heart had begun to open, and the walls she had built around herself were starting to crumble. It scared her, but at the same time, it exhilarated her. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. Not when she felt this way. Not when she knew there was more out there for her than the cold, calculated life she had been living with Julian. But as she stood there, her thoughts racing, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Claire, we need to talk." She turned around, her heart sinking as she saw Julian approaching again, his expression unreadable. "About what?" she asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. "About what happened tonight," he said, his voice tight. "I don't like being made a fool of." Claire's stomach churned. "I wasn't trying to make a fool of you," she said quickly, stepping back. "Then what were you trying to do?" He shot back. "You think I don't notice the way you were looking at him? You think I don't see the way you're pulling away from me?" Claire didn't know how to respond. She had always played her role in their marriage, always kept up the facade. But now, standing in front of him. The reality of their relationship felt suffocating. She had spent years trying to ignore the truth, but it was impossible now. Julian had made it clear from the beginning that their marriage was a transaction, nothing more. But for the first time, she was questioning everything. Could she really continue living in a marriage where love was absent, where affection was forbidden, and where she was treated as little more than an accessory to his success? Before she could say anything, Julian reached out and grabbed her wrist, pulling her closer. "You're mine, Claire," he said, his grip tightening. "And you'll never leave me. Do you understand?" Claire stared up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. This wasn't the man she had fallen for. This wasn't the man she had married. He was something else now, something controlling, something dark. And suddenly, the life she had been living didn't feel so secure anymore. She felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of his words, his touch. Was this really the life she wanted? Or was it time to break free? Millionaire husband said never touch me public, but when he saw her with another man he lost control. The grip on Claire's wrist tightened as Julian's words echoed in her mind. "You're mine, Claire, and you'll never leave me." His voice was firm, commanding, and yet something in it made her stomach twist with unease. The man she had married, the successful businessman, the cold and distant millionaire, wasn't the same anymore. Julian's possessiveness, his need to control, it was suffocating her. She had spent years pretending to fit into a life she didn't want, living in a world where love was absent, and affection was nothing but a rule to be followed. The truth had been buried deep, but now, after that brief encounter with Liam, the walls she had carefully built were starting to crumble. She tried to pull her wrist away, but Julian's grip only tightened, his eyes narrowing with anger. "Don't test me, Claire," he hissed, his voice a mixture of frustration and something darker. "You belong to me." Claire felt a wave of panic rush through her. This wasn't the man she had once admired. The man who had promised her stability, protection, and a future. He had turned into someone she barely recognized. "Let go of me, Julian," Claire finally said, her voice trembling but determined. For the first time in their marriage, she wasn't going to stay silent. "You're hurting me." Julian hesitated for a moment, but when he saw the fire in Claire's eyes, he released her wrist, though his expression remained cold and hard. He took a step back, running his hand through his hair, his anger not dissipating but simmering beneath the surface. "You think I don't know what you've been doing?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Flirting with that man at the gala? You think I didn't notice how you looked at him?" "Don't think I'm blind, Claire." Claire took a deep breath, her heart racing. "Julian, I wasn't flirting with him," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "We were talking. And that's all. Just talking." But even as she said it, Claire knew that it was more than just that. She had felt something that had been missing for so long in her life. Liam had made her feel seen, heard, understood. For the first time, she wasn't just the trophy wife, the woman in the background. She was someone, with her own thoughts, her own feelings, her own desires. And that scared her. Scared her because it made her realize just how hollow her marriage to Julian had become. "Don't lie to me," Julian snapped. "I know what I saw. You've been pushing me away for months, Claire, and now you're pulling closer to another man. What is it, huh? Do you think I'm just a stepping stone for you to get what you want?" His words stung, and Claire could feel the weight of them settling in her chest. She hadn't realized how much she had been drifting from him, but now that he had pointed it out, the truth hit her hard. She was unhappy. She was lonely. And she didn't know how much longer she could pretend everything was fine. "I'm not asking for much, Claire," Julian continued, his voice softening just a little. "I've given you everything. I've built this life for us, and all I ask in return is your loyalty. You can't even give me that." "I don't know what I want anymore, Julian," Claire whispered, more to herself than to him. "I've spent so many years trying to make this work, trying to be what you wanted me to be, but I don't even recognize myself anymore." Julian's face darkened. "Are you saying that I'm the problem here? That I'm the one who's holding you back?" he asked, his tone growing colder by the second. "You don't get it, do you?" Claire replied, her voice rising. "You never did. It's not about you or Liam. It's about me, Julian. It's about how I've lost myself in this marriage. How I've given everything to you and gotten nothing in return." For a moment, Julian was silent. His eyes flickered with something regret. Maybe, but he quickly masked it with anger. "Fine," he said finally, his voice tight. "If you think you can do better, then go. Leave. But don't come crawling back when you realize you've made a mistake." Claire stood there for a long moment, staring at her husband, feeling a mixture of fear and relief wash over her. This was it, the moment where everything could change. She had always known that she wasn't happy, but to hear Julian say the words out loud to tell her to leave was something she wasn't prepared for. But deep down, Claire knew that it was time to make a choice. She had to choose herself, her happiness. She couldn't live a life of quiet desperation anymore, not for the sake of money, not for the sake of appearances. And yet, as she turned to leave, she found herself hesitating. Was she really ready to walk away from everything? The wealth, the status, the life she had come to know? But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. She deserved more than this. She deserved to be loved, to be seen, to be valued, and if Julian couldn't give her that, then maybe it was time to find it elsewhere. Millionaire husband said never touch me public, but when he saw her with another man, he lost control. The night after the gala, Claire found herself in a hotel room, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone in her hand. It was the same phone that had once been her connection to the life she had carefully built with Julian, but now it felt like nothing more than a lifeline to a life she no longer wanted. Julian's words still echoed in her mind. "You'll never leave me." But she wasn't sure anymore. Could she keep living this way, trapped in a marriage that had always been about appearances, about control, and never about love? Her heart ached as she thought back to the moments she shared with Liam, the man who had made her feel seen, heard, and important for the first time in years. It was confusing, and Claire wasn't sure what to do with the emotions that had been stirred up. She had always told herself that she didn't need love. Security was enough. But now, with Julian's coldness and the warmth she felt with Liam, the truth was hard to ignore. Was it too late to change everything? Was she strong enough to walk away from all the wealth and security for the chance at something real? A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She quickly wiped the tears from her eyes, trying to compose herself before answering. When she opened the door, her heart skipped a beat. It was Julian. He stood there, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something else, something raw, vulnerable. "Claire," he said quietly, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "We need to talk." Claire felt her heart race. She hadn't expected him to show up here, not after what had happened the night before. But here he was, standing in front of her, and for the first time, she could see the cracks in his armor. "I'm listening," Claire said, her voice steady but guarded. Julian stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I know I've been distant," he started, his eyes flickering with something that resembled regret. "I've been focused on my work, on the business, and I've neglected you. But I didn't realize how much I needed you until now." Claire couldn't believe what she was hearing. Was he really apologizing? Was this the same man who had always kept her at arm's length, treating their marriage like an arrangement? She couldn't tell if it was guilt, frustration, or something else that was making him speak this way, but something in her stirred. "I'm sorry for what I said last night," Julian continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just scared." Claire blinked in surprise. "Scared of what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Julian took a deep breath, his eyes searching hers. "Scared of losing you," he said, his voice filled with vulnerability. "I've always been afraid of people getting too close to me, of them seeing the real me, the one who isn't always in control. But when I saw you with Liam, it made me realize how much I've been holding you back, how much I've been pushing you away." Claire's heart clenched as she listened to his words. She had never heard Julian speak like this before. He was always so guarded, so focused on his image, on the business, and now, here he was, confessing his fears. It was hard for her to process. "Julian, I don't know what to say," Claire said, her voice shaking. "I've spent so many years trying to fit into this life, trying to be the wife you wanted me to be, but I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know if I can keep living like this." Julian stepped closer, his eyes desperate. "I know I've made mistakes," he said, his voice breaking. "But I want to fix this. I want to be the man you need. I don't want to lose you, Claire." Claire felt the tears well up in her eyes again. But this time, they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of confusion. She had spent so long convincing herself that Julian was the one who would never change, that their marriage was just a business deal, a partnership that was convenient but devoid of love. And now, in front of her, Julian was offering something she had never thought possible. Honesty, vulnerability, a chance for something real. "I don't know if I can believe you," Claire whispered. "How do I know that this isn't just another one of your manipulations? How do I know that you're not just trying to control me, to make me stay because it's convenient for you?" Julian's face twisted with pain. "You don't have to believe me right now," he said softly, "but I'm not asking you to stay because it's convenient. I'm asking you to stay because I love you. I always have." Claire's heart raced. She had never expected to hear those words from him, and for a brief moment, she believed him. But then, the doubt crept in again. Could she trust him? Could she trust this man who had always kept her at a distance? She wasn't sure. But one thing was certain. This conversation had opened her eyes to something she had been ignoring for far too long. She wasn't ready to forgive him, not yet, but she was ready to start questioning everything. The life she had built with Julian, the life she had accepted as her own, was no longer enough. She needed more. She deserved more. Millionaire husband said never touch me public, but when he saw her with another man he lost control. Claire sat quietly in the hotel room, her thoughts racing as she processed everything that had happened in the past few days. Julian's words still echoed in her mind. "I love you. I always have." She wasn't sure what to think anymore. Her world had been turned upside down. The walls she had built around herself, the ones she had carefully constructed to protect herself from the emptiness of her marriage, were starting to crumble. She had always convinced herself that she didn't need love, that security, wealth, and stability were enough. But now, with Julian's confession, everything felt different. Her emotions were in turmoil. She could still remember the warmth she had felt with Liam, the way he had listened to her, the way he had made her feel seen, something she hadn't experienced in years. It had been so easy to talk to him, to share things she hadn't shared with anyone in a long time. But was that enough? Was it just a fleeting feeling, something brought on by the frustration of her marriage? Or was there something deeper? Claire didn't have the answers, and for once, she didn't think she had to. She wasn't sure where she stood with Julian, but she knew she couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. But even with all the confusion swirling inside her, she couldn't shake the thought that Julian was trying to change. He wasn't the man she had married, the cold and distant businessman who treated their marriage like a transaction. Maybe, just maybe, he was trying to be the man she needed. But the question was it too late? Claire took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had to make a decision, and it wasn't going to be easy. Her entire life had been built around this marriage, around the image of a perfect couple. But the cracks were becoming too obvious to ignore. She needed something real. She deserved more than this. She deserved love, honesty, and the freedom to be herself. But could she trust Julian enough to give him another chance? Was his apology genuine, or was it just another manipulation to keep her in line? Claire didn't know. But as she sat in the quiet room, she realized that whatever choice she made, she couldn't go back to the way things were. Not after everything that had happened. Not after the truth had come to light. She stood up, walking over to the window and staring out at the city below. The lights of the city seemed so far away, just like the life she had once dreamed of. A life filled with love, respect, and understanding. A life where she didn't have to hide behind a facade. She had to make a choice. Julian's words still lingered in her mind, but the one question she kept asking herself was, do I want this life with him, or do I want something more? The sound of her phone buzzing brought her back to reality. It was a message from Liam. "Are you okay?" it read. Claire hesitated for a moment before replying, "I don't know." She stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She wasn't sure what to say, what to do. She couldn't deny the way Liam had made her feel. But she wasn't ready to jump into something new just yet. She needed time to think, to figure out what she wanted. But deep down, she knew that the answers wouldn't come easy. Life wasn't a fairy tale. She wasn't going to wake up tomorrow and have everything fall into place. There were too many complications, too many emotions, too many doubts. But one thing was clear. She couldn't stay in this limbo forever. Julian had given her a choice, but it wasn't just about him. It was about her. It was about her finding her own path, her own happiness. And if that meant walking away from the man she had spent so many years with, then so be it. Claire took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She picked up the phone again, this time typing out a simple response to Liam. "I need some time to think," she wrote. "I'll talk to you soon." She hit send, then set the phone down, letting out a long sigh. The weight on her chest seemed to lift, just a little. She had made a decision. Or at least, she was beginning to. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Claire felt a sense of clarity. She didn't know where this would lead, but she knew that she couldn't keep living in a relationship that had been built on lies and control. She had to choose herself. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward finding the love and happiness she had always deserved. Millionaire husband said never touch me public, but when he saw her with another man he lost control. It had been a few days since Claire sent that message to Liam, asking for time to think. The silence in her hotel room was deafening, and it gave her all the space she needed to confront the swirling storm of emotions inside her. She had made the decision to stop running away from the truth, but that didn't make the decision any easier. She had told herself for years that she didn't need love, that security and stability were enough. But now, after everything that had happened, she wasn't so sure anymore. Julian's confession, the tears in his eyes, the vulnerability in his voice, it had shaken her. But Liam's presence, his kindness, and the way he had made her feel for just a moment, had opened a door that she couldn't close. It wasn't just about Liam, though. It was about Claire, about what she truly wanted, what she truly deserved. She deserved to be loved, to be seen, and to be cherished, not just as an accessory to someone else's success, but as a person with her own dreams and desires. The life she had been living with Julian was stifling, and the longer she stayed in that gilded cage, the more she lost herself. She looked out of the window at the bright city lights below, thinking about how far she had come and how far she still had to go. Was she ready to face the consequences of her choices? Was she ready to let go of everything she had built with Julian and embrace an uncertain future? She wasn't sure, but she knew she couldn't stay in this limbo forever. It was time to take control of her own life, to choose her own happiness. But as she stood there, contemplating her next move, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Julian. "We need to talk. I can't let you go like this." Claire felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had known this moment would come, the moment when Julian would demand her attention, when he would try to convince her to stay, to make things work. But this time, Claire wasn't so sure she could believe him. His words from that night still echoed in her mind. "You're mine." The possessiveness, the need for control, it was something Claire could never ignore again. But there was another part of her that wanted to believe him, that wanted to believe that the man she had married could change. The man who had shown her tenderness, who had shown a side of himself she never thought she would see. But was that enough? Was that enough to erase everything that had happened between them? Was she willing to throw away the chance at true happiness just for the sake of security? Claire paced the room, her heart pounding in her chest as she fought with her emotions. She loved Julian, or at least, she thought she did. But love couldn't exist without trust, and Julian had broken that trust, time and time again. Could she truly forgive him? Could she ever look at him the same way again? The answer wasn't clear, but one thing was certain. She couldn't keep living in a marriage that felt like a prison. She needed more than just a man who controlled her every move. She needed a partner, someone who could see her for who she truly was, not just as a reflection of his own success. Claire stared at the phone, her fingers hovering over the screen. She knew what she had to do. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be without consequences, but she couldn't let fear control her anymore. She had to live for herself. She took a deep breath and typed out a response. "I'm coming home, but we need to talk. I need to decide what's next for me, for us." She hit send and put the phone down. She wasn't sure what Julian would say, or how he would react. But for the first time in a long time, Claire felt a sense of relief. She was no longer afraid to face the truth. She was ready to confront the reality of her marriage and decide what she truly wanted. It was time to stop being passive in her own life. She had spent so long letting things happen to her, but now she was ready to take control. She wasn't sure where this journey would take her, or whether Julian would be a part of it, but she was ready to find out. As she packed her bags, Claire couldn't help but wonder about Liam. He had given her something she had been craving for so long: attention, care, and kindness. He had shown her that there was more to life than the cold, calculating existence she had been living. But Claire knew she had to make this decision for herself, not because of Liam, but because she needed to find her own path. She had to choose her own happiness, even if that meant walking away from everything she had known. As the taxi pulled away from the hotel, Claire couldn't help but feel a sense of uncertainty, but also hope. She was stepping into the unknown. But for the first time in a long time, she felt free. Millionaire husband said never touch me public, but when he saw her with another man he lost control. Claire had barely arrived at her apartment when her phone rang again. It was Julian. She stared at the screen for a moment, her hand hovering over the accept button. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to continue on with the decision she had made for herself. But another part of her knew that she couldn't avoid this conversation forever. She had promised herself she would confront the truth, and now was as good a time as any. With a deep breath, she pressed the button to answer. "Claire." Julian's voice came through the phone, heavy with emotion. "Where are you? We need to talk." The desperation in his voice caught her off guard. She hadn't expected him to sound so human. For the first time in years, she could hear the vulnerability in his tone, the cracks in his polished exterior. "I'm here, Julian," Claire replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm at home." There was a long pause before he spoke again, his voice more subdued this time. "Can I come over?" "I don't know if that's a good idea," Claire said softly, feeling a sense of unease settle in her chest. "We've already talked, Julian. You've said what you needed to say." "No," he replied quickly. "Not like this. I need to see you, to explain myself better. Please, Claire, I need you to understand." Claire felt her heart sink. She had already made up her mind to move on, to put herself first for once. But hearing him speak like this, it made her question everything again. Was she being too hasty? Was it possible that Julian had truly changed? She wasn't sure, but what she did know was that she needed closure. "Fine," she said after a long pause. "You can come over, but I don't know if we have anything left to say." When Julian arrived, it was clear that this wasn't just about fixing their marriage. He was different, raw, emotional, even unrecognizable from the man he had been just days before. He stood in the doorway for a moment, staring at Claire with a mixture of guilt and longing, before stepping inside without saying a word. The air between them felt thick with unspoken words, and Claire couldn't help but feel a wave of sadness. She had never imagined that their relationship would end like this, with so many unanswered questions. "I know I've hurt you," Julian finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I know that I've been controlling, distant, cold. But I never meant to hurt you, Claire. I didn't know how to love you the way you deserved. I've spent so much of my life protecting myself, and I've pushed you away without even realizing it." Claire felt her breath catch. This was the man she had always wanted to see, the one who would admit his faults, the one who would show her the love and vulnerability she had been craving. But was it too late? Could she forgive him? "Julian," Claire said quietly, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can trust you again. You've hurt me so many times, and I've kept making excuses for you. But now, I don't know if I can keep living this way. I don't know if I can keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not." Julian stepped closer, his eyes pleading. "Please, Claire, don't leave me. I'm not asking for you to forgive me overnight, but I need you to give me a chance to prove that I can change. I can't imagine my life without you." Claire looked at him for a long moment, her heart torn. She had always believed in the idea of second chances, but this was different. She wasn't sure if she could just erase the pain, the isolation, and the years of neglect. Could she trust him again? Could she believe that his words weren't just another manipulation? She wasn't sure, but what she did know was that she couldn't make a decision in the heat of the moment. "I need time," Claire finally said, her voice steady. "I need time to figure out what I want, and right now, I don't know if that includes you." Julian's face fell, but he didn't argue. He simply nodded, as if he had expected this response. "I'll give you all the time you need. he said softly, his voice breaking. "Just know that I'm here, and I'll be waiting for you. I don't want anyone else, Claire. Only you." Claire nodded, her emotions overwhelming her. She couldn't deny that part of her still cared for him, still longed for the life they had once shared. But she also knew that she couldn't keep living in a marriage where she felt invisible, where her needs and desires were constantly ignored. As Julian left, the silence in the apartment was deafening. Claire stood by the window, staring out at the city below, her heart heavy with indecision. She had made so many sacrifices for this marriage, and for the first time, she realized that those sacrifices had come at the cost of her own happiness. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: she needed to start living for herself. Whether that meant walking away from Julian, or finding a way to rebuild what they had, Claire knew it was time for her to take control of her own life. And whatever decision she made, she would no longer settle for anything less than the love and respect she deserved. Millionaire husband said never touch me public, but when he saw her with another man he lost control. The days after Julian's visit were quiet, but Claire's mind was far from peaceful. She spent her time in the apartment, pacing back and forth, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Julian's words haunted her. "I'll give you all the time you need," he had said, and Claire wasn't sure if that was a gift or a curse. She had always believed in the idea of second chances, but this time felt different. She didn't know if she could go back to the life she had with Julian, not after everything he had put her through. But as the days passed, Claire couldn't deny that a part of her still longed for what they once had. She had been with Julian for so many years, and in those years, there had been moments of happiness, even if they were few and far between. But those moments felt like memories from a different life, a life where she wasn't so lost, so unsure of who she was. Claire had spent too long hiding behind the walls of her marriage, convincing herself that she didn't need more than what she already had. But now, she realized, she needed more. She needed love, she needed honesty, and most of all, she needed to feel valued for who she truly was. The longer she sat with her thoughts, the more Claire realized that the life she had with Julian was no longer enough. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. It wasn't. And the more she thought about it, the more she knew she couldn't return to a life where she was constantly invisible, constantly ignored, constantly just playing a part in someone else's world. But there was Liam. Liam had been a breath of fresh air, a reminder of what it felt like to be truly seen. He had given her kindness when she had needed it most, and though their connection had been brief, it had made Claire realize something important. She deserved more. She deserved to feel like she mattered. As she thought about Liam, Claire couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt. She hadn't intended for things to go the way they did. She hadn't set out to fall for him, but the way he made her feel was undeniable. He had made her feel heard, valued, and even in the short time they had spent together, she felt more alive than she had in years. But Claire knew that rushing into something with Liam wasn't the answer. She wasn't ready for that. Not yet. She needed to find herself again before she could truly open her heart to someone else. The phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Julian. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you, please." Claire stared at the message for a moment, her thumb hovering over the screen. She had been avoiding him for days, but something about this message felt different. It wasn't the usual demand, the usual control. It was a plea. Julian had finally let down his guard. She couldn't deny the pull she still felt toward him, but could she really trust him? Could she trust him to change? Or was she just setting herself up for more disappointment? As Claire read the message again, she realized something. She couldn't keep living in this space of uncertainty. She had to make a decision. It wasn't about Julian anymore. It wasn't about Liam either. It was about Claire. It was about her future, her happiness, her life. She couldn't let anyone dictate that for her anymore. Claire took a deep breath, the weight of her decision heavy in her chest. She had spent so many years living for others, first for her family, then for Julian, and now, for the first time in a long time, she was going to live for herself. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew she had to stop hiding from it. The decision wasn't going to be easy, but it was hers to make. She was ready to face it, whatever it might be. Without another thought, Claire typed her response. "I'll meet you. But this time, we need to be honest with each other." She hit send, then put the phone down, feeling a mix of relief and fear. This was it, the moment that would change everything. Claire had no idea what would come next, but she knew she couldn't stay in limbo forever. She needed clarity. She needed closure. And most importantly, she needed to choose a path that was her own. Julian would have his say, but the final decision would be hers. She was taking control of her own story now, no longer letting anyone else write it for her. She stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city that had always felt so far away. For the first time, it didn't seem so distant anymore. She was ready to face it, ready to take that first step into the unknown, ready to embrace whatever came next. Millionaire husband said never touch me public, but when he saw her with another man he lost control. Claire stood outside the cafe, the cool breeze tugging at her hair as she waited for Julian. She had agreed to meet him, but she wasn't sure what to expect. After everything that had happened, she wasn't sure if anything could change. She wasn't even sure if she wanted it to. The past few days had been a whirlwind of emotions, and Claire had spent more time than she cared to admit questioning everything. Julian's plea, the way he had looked at her that night, and his words, "I love you. I always have." But how could she believe him now? How could she trust that the man she had married, the man who had kept her at arm's length for so long, had truly changed? The truth was, Claire didn't know if she could ever trust him again. Her heart still ached from the years of neglect, the times when she had been nothing more than a pawn in his world. She had spent so much time being what he wanted her to be that she had forgotten who she really was. But now, she was starting to remember. She was starting to understand what it meant to put herself first, to stop living for someone else. And that was the hardest part of all. She wasn't sure if Julian could give her the life she wanted, the life she deserved. She wasn't sure if he could give her love, or if he would just continue to control her. But Claire knew one thing for certain. She wasn't willing to settle for a life where she felt invisible, where her needs didn't matter. She wanted more. She deserved more. And if that meant walking away from Julian, then so be it. She wasn't going to hide behind her fears anymore. As Julian walked into the cafe, Claire's heart skipped a beat. He looked different, distraught, but determined. He didn't look like the man who had once held all the power, who had controlled every aspect of their marriage. There was vulnerability in his eyes, and Claire felt a twinge of sympathy. But it wasn't enough. It couldn't be enough. She had to make this decision for herself. "Claire," Julian said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know this isn't easy. I've made mistakes. But I need you to know that I'm not the same person I was before. I've spent so much time thinking about what we had, what I've lost, and what I can do to fix it. I know I can't undo the past, but I can try. I can try to be the man you need." Claire looked at him for a long moment, her heart heavy with emotion. She had never seen him like this before. He was pleading with her, begging her for a chance. And for a moment, she almost believed him. But then she thought about everything that had led up to this point, the years of feeling alone, the countless times she had been silenced, ignored, and made to feel invisible. She couldn't just forget that. "Julian," she said quietly, her voice trembling, "I don't know if I can believe you anymore. I don't know if I can trust that things will be different this time. You've hurt me too many times, and I've let you. I've let myself stay in this empty marriage, because I thought it was all I deserved. But I'm starting to realize that I deserve more than this. I deserve to be seen, to be loved, to be valued. And I can't keep living for you, for your business, for your success. I need to live for myself." Julian's face fell, and for a moment, Claire thought he was going to argue, to plead with her some more. But then, something unexpected happened. He nodded, slowly, as if he finally understood. "I've never wanted to make you feel like this," he said, his voice breaking. "I know I've failed you, and I know I've pushed you away, but I can't force you to stay. I can't make you love me. If you need to go, Claire, then I won't stop you. But I want you to know that I've always loved you. I always will." Claire felt a weight lift off her shoulders, but it wasn't the weight she had expected. It wasn't relief. It was a strange sense of finality, as if she had reached the end of a long, painful chapter in her life. She wasn't sure what would come next, but she knew that she couldn't go back. "I need to go," she said softly, her voice firm. "I need to find myself. and I need to do it on my own." Julian looked at her one last time, and for a moment their eyes locked. It was a silent goodbye, a recognition that their paths had diverged, and they could no longer walk them together. Claire stood up, her heart pounding, and turned to leave. As she stepped outside into the crisp air, she felt a sense of freedom wash over her. It wasn't easy, it wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long time, Claire felt like she was finally living for herself. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that whatever it was, she would face it on her own terms. She deserved happiness, she deserved love, and for the first time, she believed that she could find it without anyone else's permission. In this emotional and dramatic journey, a woman finds herself caught between the complexities of her marriage to a powerful millionaire and the longing for something more genuine. As she faces the struggles of living in a loveless relationship with her millionaire husband, Claire begins to question everything, including her own happiness. This is not just another one of the typical millionaire stories, but a deep dive into the emotional turmoil of a woman who dares to choose herself over the wealth and security she once believed was enough. As Claire takes steps toward freedom, her story unfolds in a way that reflects the true power of self-discovery, proving that even in the world of millionaire stories, love and respect are things that cannot be bought. Throughout this compelling narrative, we explore the complexities of relationships, personal growth, and the realization that true love cannot be controlled or manipulated. This millionaire story challenges the typical narrative, offering a raw and authentic exploration of what it means to be truly seen and valued. While the story starts with the cold, controlled life of a millionaire, it evolves into something much deeper, highlighting how even in the realm of millionaire stories, the search for love and fulfillment is universal. Claire's journey is a testament to the strength it takes to walk away from what is comfortable and embrace the unknown. And in the end, it proves that no matter the wealth or status, every heart deserves to be free, loved, and truly understood. Don't miss out on this unique take on millionaire stories that goes beyond the typical fantasy and dives into real, relatable emotions.